Hey guys, this is Yoda, and this video will be a guide slash FAQ for Protection Paladin in Dragonflight Season 3, mostly focused on Mythic Plus. So, without further ado, this is the talent build that I've been playing. You have a lot of choices here. You can either play Spell Warding or Improved Ardent Defender, or Inspiring Vanguard if you don't need that. Right side's pretty set in stone. That's pretty much the only change you ever make in keys. You can swap Strength and Adversity to Crusader's Resolve if a boss is giving you a lot of trouble, but usually Strength and Adversity is going to be better. On the left, we have a lot of choices. So up here, you can play Freedom or No Freedom. You can play Turn Evil for like Black or Cold, or for Incorporeal. You can play 1-point Short Hodge. You can play Red Aura if you have another Paladin. You can even drop Blind for like Freedom and Obduracy. I've seen some people do that. You can also play this. You have a lot of choices up here. Basically, you want to fit for the situation. Middle row, you also have some choices. You have Golden Path, Sacrifice of the Just, and Punishment. You get 2 out of 3, basically, of those. Golden Path benefits from the tier set this season. Otherwise, it's like kind of doesn't heal very much, so you wouldn't use it. This is pretty good for just general use, Sacrifices of Just and Punishment. But if there's like a really tough boss and you don't really need help on the trash, or you don't really care about your damage on trash, then you can just play Golden Path and Sacrifice the Just. Another choice you have is Protection, Blessing Protection versus Double Freedom versus Lightforged Blessing. Basically, Double Freedom if you need it for like entangling. Blessing of Protection if you need it in the dungeon. Basically, it's very dungeon specific. Like it's really good in Wakecrest Manor for the tree boss. And Lightforged Blessing if you don't need any of that. It gives you a decent amount of buff healing. You can't really skip something here because Crusader's Reprieve is kind of really good. And so you need to get one of these 3 to get there. Alright, so that's talents. Also get some questions often about stats. So Prot Paladin stats basically go like this. Haste is our best stat. You're willing to go up to 20% DR, so that's like 42 to 43%, and you want at least 35, I think, before you start doing actual high keys. Haste is the best stat both defensively and offensively because it gives you cooldown reduction from Righteous Protector and Resolute Defender. Next we have crit. So I've actually been playing really high crit in a lot of keys. The main reason for that is because basically right now I'm gearing my character for raid. And in raid you play high crit to do more DPS because you don't need to worry about survivability as much. So crit is your best offensive stat. I'd go like all the way up to DR, like up to 40%. If you're super comfy, but you know, usually not that high. 40 is like basically our raid build. Mastery is the opposite. It's your best defensive stat because it gives you more DR and Consecrate than Versatility does. And on top of that, it gives you block chance. So Mastery is our best defensive stat. The flip side is it's not so great for offense because all it does is give you attack power. Like a small amount will outweigh like high amounts of verse and crit, but generally if you want to do high damage, you stay away from Mastery. I think on my guide, I recommended like at least 15 and then highest 35, basically, depending on how tanky you really want to be. Verse is somewhere in the middle. Like in your consecration, Mastery is just better in every way defensively, but it is better offensively. And then sometimes also you'll be like grouping and you're not going to be able to be in your consecrate, and then versatility is really useful there. So I'd say you want like 10 to 25 depending. Honorable mention here is Leech. Leech is really, really good on Prot Paladin because unlike other tanks that self-heal a lot, oftentimes your self-healing is not that much over your max health. So like, let's say a Death Strike or Death Knight is Death Strike, and like oftentimes they'll Death Strike twice and they'll just be full health and like it'll overcap the healing, right? But with Paladin, it's not so much. And on top of that, if you don't need to heal yourself, then that's the global you can save to do damage with, right? Or Holy Power you don't need to use for healing. So Leech is extremely good on Prot Paladin. I would prioritize gear with Leech over basically anything else, as long as it's not like too low item level. But like I would go like Heroic versus Mythic gear, I would take a Heroic gear with Leech every time. For files, you want to use Eye in the Storm generally on Fortified. It's better in trash pulls. And then Corrupting Rage is basically just for raid, or if you're like in a low key, you can do more damage with it. And then Versatile, like for general use, and Tyrannical. Alright, next we go over the trinkets. Your best trinket, I don't have yet, is from the last boss. It is Fire Axe Blazing Heart, or Fire Axe Tainted Rage Heart. This basically does a lot of damage when you use it. It's very similar to Blood Spattered Scale from Shadowlands, except it just does a lot of damage and it also shields you for a lot. So I think this is the best trinket in general. And then in keys, you're a tank, so if you die, it's GG often. So most of the time you'll want cheat death. If you don't want cheat death, you can play an offensive trinket, which is your best one, is also from the last boss. It's Augury of the Primal Flame. It just does some damage. Cataclysmic Signet Brand is what I'm currently using because I don't have anything better, and it's my highest eye level trinket. If you ever drop combat in the dungeon, though, this kind of sucks, so it's only useful in some dungeons. Like both Dawn of the Infinite is basically unusable. You can also have this branch which you can use, Branch of the Tormented Ancients. If you do not yet have Fire Axe Tainted Rage Heart, I would recommend using this branch and Prophetic Stone Scales. If you don't have the branch yet, then you can use Razan's Leaving Eye or the stat stick from Black or Cold. Let me go there real quick. It is this one, Ember of Nullification. The effect on this isn't that good, but it has like really high verse baseline, so it's a pretty strong trinket. Although honestly, if you can get the Rage Heart, then you just play Rage Heart Stone Scales or Rage Heart Augury every key once you're like fully maxed on gear. For embellishments, generally you're just going to want Shadow Flame. You can play Shadow Flame right now. I have Shadow Flame and the Frostfire belt. There's also the Frostfire leg guards, which I'm not playing. Those are okay, but my problem with them is that if you have like the highest haste possible, then like that thing will give you like 1,000 more haste, which is like kind of bad when at 20% DR, right? So, and it's also useless on most bosses. So I prefer not to use those pants. I just play Shadow Flame and Frostfire belt. All right, next for actual gameplay decisions, we'll go into cooldowns. So your base cooldown is Sentinel. This is a talent. It changes your Avenging Wrath, which is Wings, into Sentinel. So basically when you use this, most of the time you'll have high stacks, like 10 to 15 usually, and you'll have 15 on pretty high uptime. What that means is while this is active, you have 15% more max health and 30% damage reduction, which is extremely strong as far as tank cooldowns are concerned. Usually when Sentinel's up, you don't really need to use anything else. And on top of that, it's your best offensive cooldown. So since it's so strong defensively and offensively, and then it also has reduced cooldown, this is basically like what makes Prot Paladin what it is. It is nerfed from Season 1, but it's still super strong. You want to be using this as many times as possible. The only times you would hold it is if you need it like on pull for the next pull or something. But in terms of like working it into your defensive rotation, the first step of like making a rotation is that you use Sentinel off cooldown almost all the time. On top of that, when you use it, since we have Zealous Paragon, it also activates Hammer of Wrath. Oh, Hammer of Wrath actually activates baseline, never mind. So Hammer of Wrath activates baseline. Since you have Zealous Paragon, using Hammer of Wrath and Judgment extend your Sentinel. Alright, so that's Sentinel. Basically you want to use this all the time, as many times as possible. Next we have Eye of Tyr. This basically is a 45-second cooldown. It does decent damage, and the main use is to reduce all incoming damage by 25%. So the cooldown on this is really low. It's not bad to use it on pull with Sentinel because like Sentinel usually lasts maybe 30 to 35 seconds. So by the time Sentinel's over, this will be up pretty soon anyway, right? So you can use it instantly, or you can wait for the end of Sentinel to use it. That's good. That's good use too. But as a 25%, it's like not as strong as Sentinel and not as strong as Guardian, but it's a little bit stronger than Ardent. Next we have Guardian of Ancient Kings. This says 5-minute cooldown, but it's reduced by Resolute Defender and also by Righteous Protector. So realistically, it's more like 2 minutes, maybe a little bit less. Usually, this is like a super strong cooldown. It gives you 50% damage reduction, so you don't want to overlap it with Sentinel. And you also don't want to overlap it with the free proc you get from Gift of the Golden Valkyr. So think about that before you use it. Usually, basically, I'll use it like on pull. If I don't have Sentinel, then I'll use this. Basically, that's the way I use it. Also, if like a hard pull is like still alive for some reason at the end of Sentinel, then you can send this too. Ardent Defender is 20%, but it's another super short cooldown. You can just send this on pull with Sentinel, and you can also use it at the end. And it's also really good against tank busters. So like if a tank buster would one-shot you, even through the 20%, it still won't kill you with Ardent. It'll just consume the Ardent, and then you can heal yourself back up afterwards. Then we have Bubble, Divine Shield. It's a 3.5 minute cooldown. Makes you immune to everything, and with Final Stand, it taunts everything. Be wary, sometimes this bugs out and doesn't actually taunt everything, so I recommend having a cancel bubble macro on your bar, just in case. Because if like you push it, this bugs out, then your whole team's dead. You could like theoretically save some of them from the bug by like canceling bubble real quick. It says 3.5 also, but it's actually reduced by Resolute Defender. So realistically, it's more like 2 minutes. And you want to use bubble when basically you don't have anything else running. Because if you bubble with something else, then that other cooldown is just getting wasted, right? Okay, and then we have Divine Toll. Usually you want a Divine Toll either on pull or with your tier set, depending on what the situation calls for. So it's really good for grouping, and it's really good for damage. So let's say you have a caster over here, and the pack's here, right? You could just Divine Toll. Obviously there's no caster over there, but it's gonna, you could just throw shield at this, then tab, throw shield at this, and then everything's grouped basically, right? On top of that, it also gives you resonance, so you're able to chain interrupt a mob for like 10 more seconds. And then also, with all of your talents, especially Bulwark of Order, pushing Divine Toll actually gives you a pretty big absorb. So it's not only defensive cooldown, it's an offensive cooldown. Generally, like you want to be using it with Sentinel when possible, so you like Sentinel, Divine Toll, and then you're like immune to damage for the next however long. Then we also have the super long cooldowns like Spell Warding, Lay on Hands, and Bop. Spell Warding, usually when you're playing it, you'll like have scripted times in the dungeon where you're using it, so just think about the dungeon beforehand and think, oh, I'm going to spell ward this, I'm going to spell ward that. Otherwise, if you don't have those timings, then you just wouldn't play it. You would play Inspiring Vanguard or Barricade of Faith or Improved Ardent Defender instead. Blessing and Protection is the same way. Usually you have set things you want to bop. Good examples of spell warding are like Tank Busters in Murazon's Rise and the Spiders in Black Hold. And then Blessing and Protection is useful against like bleeds, usually not on you, like on your allies. Let's say the dogs in Dawn of Tides, I don't think they're actually dogs, but the little guys that run around and fixate people, Blessing and Protection is really useful against those. And Lay on Hands is almost never scripted. Basically, you just use this as a clutch heal. You don't want to use it on yourself most of the time, because your Divine Shield is better and you can't use both. But if you're like gonna die and bubbles down, then you can Lay on Hands yourself. Otherwise, you want to use it like when there's a tough healing moment to help your healer out. Rotation-wise, you want to be using Avenger's Shield. So Avenger's Shield has really high priority on AoE for pure DPS, but in most packs, it's better to be saving it just to get interrupts. Otherwise, you know, casts are going to go off, and then your party's going to complain that you're not a Vengeance Demon Hunter. So it's better to save it for interrupts, which means basically you only need to think about 3 abilities. Hammer of Wrath, Judgment, and Blessed Hammer. So Hammer of Wrath is highest priority, then Judgment, then Blessed Hammer. But in Season 3, we have a tier set, which says every time you Judgment, you get a stack, up to 5 stacks. And at 5 stacks, you get to put down a big Consecrate. So that changes the priority a little bit. If you don't have your big Consecrate yet, you want to be Judgmenting as many times as possible to build up your stacks. We'll just get to 5 real quick here. So once you get 5 stacks, you put down the big Consecrate. Now Judgment doesn't change the stack amount, right? So now you would prioritize Hammer of Wrath over Judgment. You still prioritize Judgment over Blessed Hammer, but once you have your big conk down, you're not really prioritizing Judgment anymore over Hammer of Wrath. Okay, next we're going to talk about managing your self-healing with your off-healing. So this is another thing that kind of sets most paladins apart, like how you can be a lot better than other paladins. The first thing to note is that Prot Paladin is not like other self-healing tanks. It's not like Vengeance Demon Hunter and Blood DK, where you're completely self-reliant. Those tanks, like, they can tank the freaking world and just heal themselves up to full. Prot Paladin is not like that. Because those tanks have healing based on their damage taken. Prot Paladin has healing, it's all just flat numbers. So whatever damage you take, if you can heal it, you can heal it. If not, then you need help. So that's the first thing you need to understand about Prot Paladin. You can't just pull the world and be like, oh, I can heal myself through. Easy. Okay, the second thing is, when you're playing a tank, especially Prot Paladin, it's more important to mitigate damage on yourself than to do more healing. Because the main reason for that is that if you're taking too much damage, then the group as a whole is doing less healing because the healer needs to focus on you, which is going to fuck with their plan to heal the group. So any amount of logs that you were giving them to make up for that are not going to make up for them having to heal you too much. So what that means is, basically you want to be in your Consecrate 100% uptime, obviously, and you want to have Shield of Righteous 100% uptime when possible. If you don't have Shield of Righteous up and you're fighting mobs that are meleeing you, you should run away. The other thing that means is, while you're fighting, especially on Fort, while you're fighting trash, you want to have at least one thing running. So Sentinel, or Eye of Tyr, or Guardian of Kings, or Ardent Defender. Try not to overlap like two big cooldowns, like Sentinel plus Goak is usually kind of not ideal. You can use Sentinel with like one of these low cooldown ones because they come back like by the time Sentinel ends because Sentinel is so long. But try not to overlap too much. And then in Season 3, this is one of the cool things we get. With the tier set, so you'll notice we have 3 stacks, right? Every time you Judgment, you get 2% more DR. After 5, you can put down the Consecrate. In this Consecrate, you have 10% damage reduction, and also you have activated Cleansing Flames. So all of your healing is also increased, basically. So big Consecrate basically counts as a cooldown, like a really minor one, but it still counts. So you always want to have something running. Try not to overlap too much and always have something. That's the key to Prot Paladin. That is most of the basics that we've gone through. So a few advanced tips, like let's say you're fighting a pack. Let's say you're fighting a pack and this pack's about to die. And you don't want to waste your big Consecrate, alright? It's a pretty big cooldown. But you also don't want to have no DR for the rest of it. So you can get to 4 stacks, like I have 4 stacks right now, drop Consecrate, and then just don't Consecrate again until the pack's dead. When the pack's dead, force over the next pack, Sentinel, big Consecrate, Divine Toll, boom, big death. And then one cool trick you can do with Bulwark of Righteous Fury, which is this talent. Every time your Avenger's Shield hits, it increases the damage of your next Shield of Righteous. It's important to note that it's when your shield hits, right? So let's say I Divine Toll these 5 dummies, right? My Divine Toll is going to shoot out 5 shields, and each of those is going to hit like 5 times. So I'm going to get 5 stacks of this like so many times over. But if I push it an insta-use Shield of Righteous, then like the shields that bounce after I use Shield of Righteous will give me 5 stacks again. So I'll push it and then insta Shield of Righteous, and then you notice even though I used 1 Shield of Righteous, I still have 5 stacks after. So you can get like an extra 5 stack one after that. And the other thing is just be aware. I guess we kind of went over this already. Be aware of your strong and weak Consecrates. Like when you have a weak Consecrate down, you're doing less healing, you're doing less damage. So you want to have a cooldown running, like Eye of Tyr, Ardent, maybe Goak, it depends on the situation. Then when you have strong Consecrate, like you're strong, so you don't necessarily need to use any of that. And also when you have strong Consecrate, you may be using Divine Toll or Eye of Tyr, because it's better to use your damage in strong Consecrate than in the weak one. And we've gone and talked for 20 minutes. So that is the Prot Paladin guide video form. There is a written guide, which I will link below the video. The written guide is going to be a lot more updated than the video one, since I'm just posting this once. Be sure to follow that. And If you want to see a lot of more Prot Paladin content, be sure to follow on Twitch, twitch.tv/YodaDD. That's all for now. Thanks everyone for watching.